Okay, so what is the problem then? Something is in the air and we are producing greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane, and yet carbon is everywhere. Life itself is made of carbon. Carbon is one of the main elements of life. People talk about elements of life and carbon comes up: nitrogen, phosphorus, hydrogen, sulfur, oxygen, and so on and so forth. But Earth set a new record for highest ever global temperature in 2023. Before that, it had set records 3 years in a row: 2014, 2015, and 2016. So we are obviously getting warmer and warmer. And between 2001 and 2016, Earth had 16 of the 17 warmest years on record, dating back to 1880, where the Industrial Revolution impact began to be obvious, but that's also how far back we have some very good data. If greenhouse gases have always been a part of our atmosphere, why is the Earth getting warmer now? This is the key question, right? We know the science behind it very well. It's because in recent years greenhouse gas levels have risen, and one gas in particular is trapping more and more heat. It's the carbon dioxide, or CO2 for short. CO2 is made up of oxygen and one other element, carbon. An element is something so simple it can't be broken into smaller substances, which as you grow up you may find is not necessarily true. And if you're old enough as you are listening to this, you already know this, right? So like oxygen, carbon is everywhere. It's in every form of life and in oceans, rocks, and soil. It moves from living things to the environment and back to the living things, and this cycle we call the carbon cycle. I have some podcasts already in this course, in the previous sections, introducing the carbon cycle. And I have courses on entire carbon cycle of the past and present and where we are going into the future. What does this cycle do? How does this work? People and animals breathe in oxygen and breathe out CO2. Plants and trees take in CO2 to grow and make food, carbohydrates, sugars in the process. They also burn that sugar to survive, to grow, and so on, and to reproduce. So they emit oxygen while doing photosynthesis, but they also emit CO2 when they burn their own sugar to survive. They make their sugar and they burn it and release some oxygen and CO2. We only consume food produced by others like animals or plants, and we consume oxygen and we produce CO2. Of course, climate change isn't something that started only recently. It has happened again and again over the course of billions of years. Billions, that's a lot of years. And we said already in the previous sections that this can happen and has happened in the past, because the continents move and they build mountains, and the sun's orbit or Earth's orbit around the sun makes some changes, and sun has sunspots which changes the amount of energy and so on, and you get cooling and heating and ice ages disappearing and so on and so forth. Dinosaurs, meteorites crashes and dinosaurs disappearing and so on and so forth, right? So here is a nice kid walking his dog in the park with some trees, and the tree is taking CO2, making food for itself and for others, and producing oxygen through photosynthesis. And the kid is happy to walk in there, and the animal is also happy to walk in the park, but both are breathing oxygen and releasing CO2, which the plant can take up. Okay, so plants produce oxygen, but they also release some oxygen, but they keep a lot of the carbon, because as they are growing, all these things are made of carbon. The trunk and the branches and the leaves are made of carbon, and we are born, we have some carbon in our body, but the plants can live long time and they can keep the carbon, or we can bury the tree and keep the carbon in the ground as well. Okay, so that's the cycle. There are other kinds of things in the air and in the water, in the soil and so on. everything we do is requiring energy. The shirt I'm wearing and the food I consume, the glasses I'm wearing, the computer, the camera, and everything, YouTube, loading the podcasts and you listening to it, everything requires energy, electricity, or something else, and we are producing most of the energy through coal and petrol and gas, and we are emitting lots of nasty materials, chemicals into the atmosphere. Unfortunately, we have another type of pollution that's called plastic pollution, which we will look at later on. So you can see this horrible sight here with a kind of a pathway or a riverbed that is completely covered in plastic, and you can go to a village or a rural area and dig the soil down to 20 feet and you still find plastic down at that depth. So we are really producing a lot of plastic, which is not a problem. It's a very good material for storing things, for transporting things, for saving things, for covering things, and so on. But we are throwing it everywhere, and of course we are traveling in vehicles, buses, cars, trains, planes, automobiles, and all of them are also using energy and emitting pollution, CO2 and nitrogen oxides and particulate material that's in the air, and you breathe it and it makes you sick, and so on. Okay, so this is another picture of a city that is looking tremendously polluted, and you can see the sun looks very different color and the mountains are barely visible. In fact, sunsets get more spectacular when you have a lot of pollution and particulate matter in the atmosphere, but it can kill you. Okay, lots of human diseases, cardiovascular diseases, heart attacks, diabetes, blood pressure, and so on are related to pollution and particulate matters. Poor street dogs that live on the street and breathe this air got pollution in their brain, and maybe that's making them crazy and bite more people, and then we say they must be finished off because they're biting people, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 2, which is about something is in the air, something in the air, and that is pollution and greenhouse gases, which is making global warming and making it worse as well. So even if you don't think about global warming, think about all the nasty effects the pollution has on our health and the health of our precious puppy that we love to walk around with. Okay, so we'll come back and continue the next chapter, which is on climate change through the ages. We already said climate has changed in the past, even when human beings were not around, so we'll see how it had changed. We already talked a little bit about it in the previous section, but we'll revisit it to complete this book. So I want to cover this entire book, even if some of the material is a bit of a repetition from other sections. Okay, see you in the next podcast to talk about climate change through the history of Earth. See you.